Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Flycast Partners webinar. I'll be your host, and today's topic is one of the ones that we rarely get a chance to have our guest speaker on about knowledge management. We don't get to go down that road very often. And I'm very happy to announce that our very own Chris Bradfield is going to be helping us out with that today. Now, Chris is one of our senior consultants here at Flycast Partners. He has over 25 years of IT experience that includes service delivery management, IT infrastructure, desktop and help desk support and management for global companies, managing support services for domestic and international locations. Chris has extensive experience in IT infrastructure, data center, facilities projects, including deployments, upgrades, build-outs, disaster recovery, and improvement opportunities. He has worked with all levels of management and departments, including COOs, CIOs, CFOs, managers, supervisors, and staff presenting projects, training, and operational planning. And Chris has spent the last several years with customers in the implementation, integration, and use of BMC footprints and BMC client management, providing value expertise to create value and improvement in the IT operations, sales, marketing, human resources, and facilities projects. Now, Chris has worked to develop process, training, and standards, allowing customers to realize the full value of the solutions and tools at their disposal. So before we get started, Chris, let me introduce our organization. Flycast Partners is here to deliver a seriously amazing IT experience. Founded and staffed by personnel that have many years of experience in the IT space, we took the best ideas from those collective experiences and added the best components necessary to grow and become a leading value-added reseller in the North American IT market. We offer best-in-class implementation services and training in ITSM, ITAM, ITOM, and workload automation spaces using ITIL best practices. Our professional services can easily scale up or down to meet the IT needs of any customer, regardless of size, complexity, or budgetary restrictions. We offer implementation services both on-site and remote, as well as training to reinforce your company's long-term IT success. Our ongoing remote administration and support servicing offerings will enable you to focus on those normal day-to-day operations, saving you both precious time and money. I encourage you folks, reach out to us at 844-FLYCAST, that's 844-359-2278, or you can go ahead and visit us on our website and chat with us right there in the right-hand corner with one of our IT specialists. They'd be happy to talk with you. Go to our website, download some white papers, check out some of the tools we offer, look at some of the webinars that we offer, look at some things that might interest you, and even share them with your coworkers. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to the star of the show, Mr. Bradfield. Mr. Bradfield, I have just turned the screen over to you.
Hi, thank you, Rich, and welcome everybody. Today, as Rich noted, we're going to try to give you some of the ideas of the best practices with knowledge management. A lot of these practices and everything I'm going to really discuss today is tool agnostic. These are really more around the things that we train and help organizations with in a process area as opposed to anything with a specific tool. So with that said, I'm just going to kind of jump in. I've got a few slides here that we'll go over, and then kind of my perspective and the thoughts that I have around these slides. So with that, we'll just move on. And of course, I've got my IT problem here. There we go, next. So when we're working with knowledge management, one of the first things that I start with recommending to an organization is that they need to study and understand the environment and the audiences involved. You know, you have two kind of key audiences in your environment. You have the knowledge submitters. These are the people who are going to write your knowledge base documents, basically provide all the details that go into a knowledge base. And then you have the knowledge consumer. These are the people who consume the knowledge. So that could be your end users, basically internal IT customers, whether they're accountants, help desk individuals, marketing, anybody out there that really is you expect to go to your knowledge base and view the data or the information that you provide. So with that, you kind of have to focus and understand when it comes to submitters, what roadblocks do they have in place? What perceptions do they have in place? What concerns they have, and address those items. So A lot of times people will work with and they'll talk about, well, some of the roadblocks are we don't have time to document stuff, or there's no standard formats. We don't really know what's expected of us. So that's kind of really understanding what roadblocks they have, what's preventing them, or what do they think is preventing them. That's kind of the perception point, because a lot of times when we dig through the feedback, we'll find that the perception is far worse than the actual reality. And people will go, well, they have no time, and you'll work with them. Well, they're perceive that they have no time because it's not a key focus from their leadership. So they think that, well, other things take priority over that. And then, so that's kind of a perception standpoint from a submitter's perspective. So you want to really work with your submitters and find out, what do they feel about the knowledge base? What concerns do they have? What is stopping them from presenting, creating, and documenting knowledge? And then from the consumer, these are your people that are going to access the data. A lot of times when we work with people and we'll poll the customers out there in the environment, they will, one of the common things I hear is they don't know where to go, or knowledge is scattered everywhere. There's a lot of little silos and there's no central place. That's kind of a thing that I'll go over. They'll go to HR to get information about HR information, and they'll go, well, HR usually does a pretty good job of providing all the handbooks, all the information that an employee needs. But when they move into, well, IT, I have to go to another place to find IT, and then we may have information scattered around. The network team has some information for them. The help desk has their own little knowledge base over here, and it's not consistent. End users can't really find the knowledge that they need, the information that they need. And this is really consistent thing that I find is that we'll hear that, once you move away from your HR group and those organizations where you have written policies that our organization has to follow, you'll find that there's no real repository or centralized place to find knowledge. And those are kind of understanding the environment. You have to understand kind of two facets. You have to understand what is needed, desired, wanted from the submitter standpoint, because if we can't understand and address their concerns, they won't submit knowledge. And then we have to understand from the consumer standpoint, what are their expectations? How do they want to find data? What is stopping them from using a knowledge base, and address those concerns? And really, I'm going to say kind of the two things that I hear the most when it comes from the consumer is knowledge accessibility. Knowledge is scattered everywhere, and accessibility, they can't get to it when they need it. So we try to say, you consolidate everything into a single knowledge site and make it as widely accessible as possible. And then when we go to the knowledge submitters, the concerns and the stuff that I hear from those audiences are around the thought that it's not a priority from the leadership team. So if they are working on a knowledge-based document or something, they always feel like that is the last thing on the list that they should be working on. Not a lot of support there, and that there's not a lot of reasons to share knowledge and so forth. So, but each organization is a little different in these, but I think that you'll find these are kind of your key things that you'll hear. But at a minimum, start with understanding the audiences and addressing their concerns and making them part of the future of your project. Now, the next kind of area that we talk about with the knowledge base, after we've done our research and we understand kind of our audiences, what the goals are, the expectations, any of the perceptions and so forth that are out there, is designing a implementation plan. And what we really want to start with is avoiding sudden changes in the way it works. I always use kind of a thought process here that if we explained to a young person, or if you explained it to yourself that, when you start school, you've got to get to where you're in the end, you've got to go to school for 12 years in regular school. Then you got to go to college, and you have to go this and that and all your certifications. And by the time they're done, they start thinking you should go, well, I've got 25, 30 years of school. Or if you start to think about, another example is taxes. Taxes don't seem bad until you start adding them all together. When we start in a process that changes the fundamental way of somebody thinks or works, do it in small incremental changes. Implement in small phased approaches. You may start with, and this comes back to kind of what we find is that HR groups are fairly good about publishing and making their documents accessible. So if I find out that an organization says, well, we have HR stuff published, and we want to implement a new knowledge site, we'll bring the HR stuff in. And we'll start with just a simple phased approach of let's get our consumers used to going to a new site, maybe a new tool that can house all the knowledge across, whether it's HR, whether it's facilities, whether it's information technology, whatever groups that we are planning to be in scope of our knowledge. Let's start by getting just kind of focusing and changing small incremental steps. So we migrate HR into it, and then our consumers are doing the same thing that they're done in the past, but they're going to a different site, one that we can scale out and include all of our organizations. Then we'll bring on the next group or the next piece of knowledge in small incremental changes. That way, we don't have a situation where our knowledge consumers go to a site or go to where they're used to going to get information and find that everything has changed. Because what that will do is cause a lot of concern and a lot of times a bunch of negative feedback, which then once you're in a position that your consumers are down on what you're doing, have a negative perception on the hopefully the consolidation of your knowledge. Once they get that negative feedback, it's hard to overcome that. And more importantly, if there's a lot of negative feedback because the changes were too abrupt or too severe, it may just kill the project. It may, end it. Well, everybody's upset. Nobody likes it. Let's just go ahead and cancel it. And you just barely started. But if I incrementally change small things at a time, then I'm more liable or I'm more likely to not confuse, not cause problems, and kind of incrementally take people where I want them to go. So an incremental approach to our rollout is very important because it's human nature to oppose sudden change, especially when it comes to sudden change in the way we work. And if we're trying to facilitate and move more and more of our consumers to self-service for information, it can be anywhere from understanding what the policies are, from filling out appropriate forms, to self-service with issues, whatever that may be, I want to incrementally lead them to where I want them to go. And that kind of the next thing that I want to put out there is we only want to roll out parts of our new knowledge process when it's ready. A lot of times I will see people bring up a new knowledge management system, regardless of what the tool is, and they'll have grand schemes. They'll have HR listed, they'll have facilities listed, they'll have IT listed, they'll have all of these organizational functions listed and presented to the consumer. The consumer will go out there, they may go, well, I need to read some HR information. That may exist, but then they go over, well, I was in the restroom and they were out of toilet paper. How do I submit a ticket to facilities to let them know there's a problem with the restroom? They go over to the facilities section and it's all set out, but there's no information in it. And stuff like that, where we try to start out with a lot of changes and rolling out stuff before it's ready, leads to problems with the consumer because they'll stop using that. They'll go into it, they won't find the information that they need, and or worse, they find wrong information, but they go out there, they don't find what they need, and then they stop using it because they've kind of been, it's kind of that I've been burnt once, I tried it, I couldn't find anything, so I stopped using it. So when I'm phasing in and I'm working on my approach to the knowledge management rollout, small steps, and only push out or take a step when that step is ready for the consumer to start using it. Now, you may go, well, I may have the IT section on, how to request these applications or what, and there may only be 3 or 4 documents out there. That's all right, because what's happening is the consumer goes out there, they see documents, they may not find exactly what they're looking for, but they are seeing that that there is information there. That's all right. You don't have to have a document for every application or every process in your environment, but you want to make sure that if the consumer goes to a specific section in your knowledge base, that section contains information, that is just not a hollow shell. And that's what I'm kind of getting at here, is that a lot of times people will roll out hollow shells to get things where it appears like everything's out there. It appears like they're moving forward, but when you get down into the weeds, there's nothing there. So only roll out sections of your knowledge base when it's ready. And then that kind of leads to this last bullet here, is your consumers' usage and support will suffer if your information is incomplete, inaccurate, or unorganized. So when I've rolled out and I'm not ready, or I've tried to be far too aggressive, I end up with incomplete information. Documents that may not have all the data in it, may be old documents, because I see this a lot when people are going into their project. They go, well, we'll just take and migrate all the old documents from this old SharePoint site, or this all these Word documents that people put out on a file share. We'll just migrate them into our existing knowledge base, into a new knowledge base, migrate the existing into a new, and won't do anything with it to review it. That's inaccurate information. That is just a horrible experience for the consumer, because they'll go out there, they're trying to find information to meet some need, and then they'll find inaccurate information. And then lastly, unorganized. When you are developing a knowledge-based document and part of your approach, organize the data in a consistent and logical approach. And what we will work with people on is the recommendation that you organize your data in your knowledge base, knowledge-based documents, in the same organization or category approach that you do in your ticketing system. So if you have a lot of self-service tickets, and customers can go out there to your service catalog and submit requests for a new application, we want to echo that format and that structure into your knowledge base. That way, when a consumer goes out there and goes, well, I need to get an application installed, and they're not quite sure what information they need to provide or what the process is, they may go to your service catalog and see a link that says, submit a request for this application, and right next to it, they see a document that says, here are the steps and the information you need to provide. Good example that we've been running into a lot, and I think a lot of people have been running into in the last few weeks, is getting their consumers, a lot of their users, set up with VPN remote access. I think everybody's rushing to try to get it where their end users can work from home right now. And in a lot of organizations, people will have to, fill out a form or submit that they agree to policies and so forth for remote access. Well, having that remote access document on what steps are taking a person has to do, or what information they have to provide, or whatever forms they have to complete, right there next to the submit a request button is important. So that's kind of the organizational thing that we'll talk about, is keeping the knowledge base organized really in the same manner that you'd organize your tickets. All right. Now, next we want to go, when we are starting to roll out, every piece of knowledge that you have should have an owner. Ownership is very important when it comes to providing knowledge-based documents. What we run into is, and I think everybody has seen this, knowledge documents become old. You may have a knowledge document for Outlook and it be Outlook 98, or a document on Microsoft Project and it is for a project version 5 years ago, or documents about how to print and it's referencing printers that don't exist anymore. Every knowledge document that you have should have a assigned owner. Now, this is designed to make a person accountable for that data. So I want to make sure that a person has the knowledge, the authority, and the responsibility to review their knowledge-based documents at certain cycles and keep them up to date, to retire old documents, to submit new documents. So if and I'll say with VPN, if I was the owner of the VPN product and I was responsible for the documents around that, I would have my name on the document. Here's a contact for the document. Here's some information about when I'd last reviewed it. Here's the information about when I'm going to next review it. And that way, when a person looks at the document, if there's suggestions on things that are unclear or so forth, they have a clear contact about the document and they have some kind of information about when the document was last reviewed. And that's kind of the next bullet, is that you should define review schedules for each of your knowledge-based documents. That way, hopefully from the tool standpoint, that when you select a tool to facilitate and store your knowledge, it can provide automatic updates or automatic notifications to the knowledge owners that say, these are the documents that you need to review, and make sure that they're still accurate. The knowledge review process and cycle may be as simple as every 6 months, the knowledge agent gets a notification. They go out to the document, read through it, make sure it's accurate, and then change it to reviewed, and that starts a 6-month cycle again. 6 months may be appropriate. It really depends on the document. At a minimum, I always recommend that documents should be reviewed at least once a year. That way, we can make sure that the information is accurate and appropriate. Where I come from with this, and this is really kind of from an IT standpoint, is that in information technology, with a lot of things, a year is almost a lifetime. And since vendors push out new versions almost on a yearly cycle now, having a document reviewed and make sure that it's up to date yearly seems to be about the right approach. Now, when I assign knowledge owners, I want to make sure that our leadership teams reinforce that it's part of the person's roles and responsibilities of their job to make sure the documents are updated. Making sure the knowledge-based documents that you're accountable for, that the person is accountable for, are accurate and up to date, are as important as coming to work on time, clocking in, filling in your timesheets, working your tickets if you work tickets that are assigned to you. Whatever your responsibilities are in your day-to-day jobs, maybe I'll say, well, you're an accountant and you're responsible for some knowledge-based documents on how to submit expense reports. Well, your day-to-day job may be, well, I close the books in the afternoon to make sure that the daily sales books are closed. Well, right there, if that's your responsibility, if I'm accountable for running expense reports and that expense report document, then in my roles and responsibilities, I need to be listed that I'm just as accountable to make sure that the knowledge-based documents for expense reporting are updated as part of their regular cycle and kept up to date, and that feedback is addressed. That way, it becomes ingrained into our organization that sharing our knowledge, make sure that our knowledge is available to the knowledge consumers, making sure that that is just really ingrained as much of as important part of our job as our other tasks. Far too often I see people go, well, I'm accountable for, I'm accountable, and that's a strong word, but the organization will use that word, but they won't truly make it a person accountable, or it gets swept to the side. There, you instantly see there that knowledge availability, knowledge sharing is not really important to the organization compared to anything else. So we want to make sure that we make knowledge management part of the person's roles and responsibilities. And then lastly with this is with our owners, we want to make sure that there's the appropriate rewards and incentives out there to encourage knowledge contribution and ownership. I've seen all types of incentives and rewards. A lot of times people go, well, it's part of their job. If they don't do it, they get in trouble. Well, getting in trouble is a negative incentive, and it's not necessarily a good motivator. But if I am starting out, we have some knowledge incentives that will provide rewards. I've seen people go, well, the winner of the most updated documents is X, and they earn an extra day of vacation, or they get a gift card, something like that. That way, we're providing positive reinforcement out to the knowledge submitters that if they are submitting knowledge and keeping it up to date, there's some positive incentives from that. I've seen people base bonuses on knowledge. So if you submit X number of documents and they're accurate and they're positively reviewed by your peers, there's there's some bonus compensation, stuff like that. What type of rewarding incentive is not necessarily important, but what we want our knowledge submitters to understand is that it is an important part of their job, and that there are positive results when they do that. Coming from a long history in IT, everybody jumps with joy when the server manager or the server team is able to restore a server that crashed real fast. There's a lot of good jobs out there, thank yous, maybe a lunch for the team, whatever, and so forth, and kind of that hero worship. But there's very rarely a lot of rewards or, incentives for the people who are keeping our knowledge base up to date, who are making sure that when customers go out to the knowledge base documents, that they're accurate, they're properly organized, and so forth. And in a lot of cases, and the goal of a good knowledge system is to lower the number of tickets or the number of requests that we get, or make sure that when we get the requests that they're submitted correctly with the proper information. So we want to make sure that we provide those incentives. All right. And then kind of the last thing that I kind of give as a kind of a starting point with knowledge management is, how do we gather our knowledge? It's really easy. Kind of the things that people will catch is, well, how to knowledge-based documents, how to connect to OWA, how to install VPN. Here's the acceptable communication policy, stuff like this. But where we miss out is really kind of two things. And I'm going to kind of reverse these here. One is that from a project management standpoint, we should make sure that knowledge submission is part of our project standards. So when there's a project to roll out a new application, a new project to change our VPN infrastructure. Whatever that new project is, or that update project is, whatever really, I'm just going to stop putting anything in front of it and just say whatever that project is, it should be a base expectation of that project that they submit the appropriate knowledge base documents, update the appropriate knowledge base documents, review the appropriate knowledge base documents. That way, again, it comes back to a cultural expectation that knowledge submission, knowledge update, knowledge sharing is important to the organization, that we just don't roll out a new application without providing information to the consumer on how to access it, how to work with it, how to request it. Whatever that is, the how-to information or the process information, whatever is appropriate. Knowledge management has to be it's really fundamentally part of everything we do, whether that is a person on the help desk that's responsible for reviewing the tickets, kind of these, the events that go on, review tickets, outages, whatever. It's real simple to say, I'll go through those and create a knowledge base document, because, we're finding that we're getting 50 calls a week on how to clear our browser cache. So we're going to submit a knowledge base document in hopes of reducing those. Well, just as important as reviewing that event, those events, and lowering our ticket count, is just as important to review and make part of our projects to review and submit documents, because that way we are not just shifting the burden after the fact to some other team or group to create a document. We're making this part of our project. So we want to make sure that knowledge collection and submission is part of all of our projects. And we want to make sure that we do analysis of our outages, of our events, and so forth, to see if we have the appropriate knowledge for that event to help reduce or make the consumer's life easier. Simple thing, just example I used, clearing browser caches. If we're getting lots of tickets from that, we want to make sure that we submit documents. If we have an outage where, and this comes from, you don't really think about this, but if we have an outage because some patches were deployed to a server and it broke the application, well, we should look at that and submit, if we appropriate, create and submit knowledge on how to appropriately patch a server. That way it is done correctly. And if we have a new team member starting with that function, they can refer to that document, because a good knowledge management system and reviewing that helps alleviate that concern where, tribal knowledge, when a person leaves, the knowledge goes with them. If I'm the only person in your organization that knows that I have to patch a specific server in a specific way to prevent it from crashing, that should be a really kind of an internal knowledge-based document that's stored for use for whoever does the patch management. That way, if I'm on holiday or if I leave, I win the lottery and decide to take off, the next person's not left in a lurch because knowledge wasn't documented and shared. That's where looking at and reviewing our events, our outages, and so forth to harvest kind of any knowledge from there and submit that into our knowledge base is important. So those are kind of the 4 really major kind of sections that I start with in an organization, is to come here and we'll start with just starting back, understanding the audiences, understand your submitters and your consumers, what their expectations are, what roadblocks they have in the environment, what they want to see, how they expect to submit documents and so forth, or how they expect to consume them and so forth, and really start with that. That will kind of give you an idea of any gotchas where you should start at, how you should deal with any problems or perceptions that are in your environment. Then based on that information, I will develop kind of a phased approach of where I can start consolidating down or building a new system, and how do I roll that out in a, and I want to use the word slow, but slow doesn't mean that it may take years. Slow may mean over several months, but where I roll that out in a manner that's not abrupt, not sudden. It doesn't, what I don't want is somebody who did it one way Monday, or Monday, by Tuesday they come in and they look at it and they can't find the information because I made a big change. And so I work on developing a phased approach when all my information is ready to roll out my knowledge base. And then as I'm rolling out my knowledge base, I want to make sure that I assign ownership of the document. Every document that I have should have a owner. And owners should be maybe a couple, but I want to avoid ownership by a tribe. One thing that I see a lot when it comes to ownership is they'll go, well, this document's owned by the network team. Well, the network team's 15 people. Well, there's 15 people out there and none of them do it, but all of them own it. So I may have a primary owner and a secondary owner. That's really kind of as far as I want to go. I want one or two people that are accountable for it. So I want to make sure that I have ownership and review cycles and so forth. And then I want to make sure that as projects are rolled out and events happen in my environment, that those are reviewed for opportunities to improve, increase, update my knowledge. So new projects come out, knowledge-based documents submitted. If I have a problem in the environment, then I want to look at the system and say, do I have a knowledge-based document that relates to that? Was it accurate? If I didn't have a document, do I need to submit it and so forth? And those processes will help make sure that I build my knowledge base out and that it is constantly evolving as my environment evolves. So, Rich, that's really the presentation I have on kind of the processes around knowledge base today. Or, not everything that I had, but kind of the high level bullets that we work with.
This has been a great presentation, Chris. I really appreciate you taking out time out of your busy day to do this for us. And there's a great deal of information in here. I very much appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, you're absolutely welcome, Rich. And what we'd like to do is at a future date, we'll come together and we'll put together a presentation of how do we take these kind of bullets that we've talked about and implement them in some of the tools that we support. I think that would be really helpful to show, especially around here's how we assign ownership in documents, how we reinforce processes with tools.
That's awesome. I look forward to working with you on that. And audience, I appreciate you taking time out of your busy day to join us, especially with everything that's going on in the world today. And hopefully this was a little bit of a distraction for you. Please give us a call, 844-FLYCAST. That's 844-359-2278. And we'll be happy to take your call and answer any questions that you might have about this topic or any other IT topic that we might be able to help you with, or help show you some demos, or get you some services or some education of whatever that might be. You can also chat with us live on our website Monday through Friday during normal Eastern Time business hours. One of our IT experts would be more than happy to chat back and forth with you, or you can email us at info@flycastpartners.com. Once again, folks, stay safe out there, and thank you again for joining us for another Flycast Partners presentation. Take care, Chris.
All right. Thank you, Rich.